Hello. Okay, we are back again. A little less technical difficulties this time, but it's still a little bumpy. It's that kind of day. If you are with me, you can go ahead and type your name in the chat box for me to sign in. I will be right back. I'm going to close the door over here. If you would go ahead and type your name in the chat box to sign in. And if you hear some loud noises, maybe some drilling or some banging, they're trying to get into a door that has been locked across the hall. So all kinds of technical issues and things going on this morning. I feel like I'm having a Monday on a Wednesday, but that's just part of life. Okay, so we will get started back here. And let me see if I can pull up the screen for you. It's moved over. And I am going to try to share this. Actually, I want this over here. I want this one over here. Okay. So I'm going to share that screen. And we will go over our assignments as soon as I get this to work. Today is Monday for technical difficulties. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. And I'm going to make this as big as I can. And then I'm going to grab this chat box. I can communicate here. Okay. Put my pen on. So we're going to go over our assignments in inferences and political cartoons. Just a couple motivational slides for you this morning. I know that sometimes when you're doing something new or something you haven't done in a long time, you just kind of have to push yourself through. No one else is going to do it for you. We have to do it ourselves. But the harder you work for it, the better off that you're going to be, the better results you're going to have. So just stay motivated and stick with it. Okay, we're going to go over this. So we're going to read this passage about pet microchips. Pet microchips have made it easier and faster to reunite pets with their owners. These computer chips contain a pet's unique identification number. Pet owners can register the identification number with a variety of service providers. The service provider will link the number to the pet's profile in a database. If a missing pet with a microchip is found and taken to an animal shelter, A shelter worker can use a microchip reader to access the pet's identification number and find out which service provider has the pet's information. The service provider will then contact the pet owner listed in the profile. These chips last for the life of the pet and cannot be lost or damaged. They are inserted under the loose skin between an animal's shoulder blades by a veterinarian. The procedure is no more painful than a vaccination. Okay, so part A, which of these can you infer from this passage? Okay, they did give us an answer down here, but some of our options were pet microchips can be inserted by workers at animal shelters. That is not necessarily true. It does have to be inserted by a veterinarian. Pet microchips must be replaced by a veterinarian every few years. That is not true. It says they last for a lifetime. Pet microchips do not contain an owner's name, address, and phone number. They do, but not directly. They have to be, it has to be entered into a database. It's not something that you can just immediately access if you looked at that microchip. So A is the best option. It says pet microchips are tracking devices that can provide the location of a missing pet. That would be what we would infer from this paragraph or this passage. Okay, moving along. This is about Althea Gibson, Grand Slam champion. I'm going to go, we'll do this, we're going to read the question and we'll refer back to the passage. What inference can be made from the information in paragraph 2? So let's look at paragraph 2. Althea was born in 1927 in a small town in South Carolina. Her parents were sharecroppers on a cotton farm. In search of better opportunities, Althea's family moved to Harlem, a predominantly Black neighborhood in New York City. As a young girl, Althea enjoyed sports. She was especially good at basketball and paddleball. Okay, so what inference can be made from that paragraph? Is it that Althea did not want to leave the South, leave South Carolina for New York? It did not mention that or anything to that effect, so that is not the answer. Althea could have played professional women's basketball. We know that she was good at it, but we don't know if she was good enough to play professional basketball by reading that paragraph. Althea's parents achieved success in New York City. It does mention that they moved to New York, but it doesn't mention that they were successful there or anything that would lead us to believe that. So that is not the answer. Althea was a talented athlete from a very young age. This we could infer from that paragraph because it does mention as a young girl, she enjoyed sports. She was especially good at basketball and paddleball. Okay, so the answer to that is D. Okay. In New York, this is an inference. This is meaning this is something that somebody inferred from this passage. In New York, Althea's family lived in a low-income part of the city. So what text evidence would best support this inference? Is it that Althea's parents had been sharecroppers on a cotton farm in South Carolina? That might lead you to believe that they might have had to live in a low income, but I don't think that's what we're looking for. Althea learned to play tennis in a program for people in poor neighborhoods. I believe that this would be the answer because if you look in paragraph 3 over here, it says she was introduced to tennis through a program that brought the sport to poor neighborhoods. So we know this is after they moved to New York City, and evidently they're living in a poor neighborhood. So that is why the answer would be B. That is the one that makes the most sense Okay, number 3. Which of these can be inferred from the passage? Althea's parents wanted her to be a golfer, not a tennis player. That is not mentioned anywhere in that passage. Althea was not as successful at professional golf as she had been at professional tennis. It doesn't mention that. In fact, it mentions that she is pretty good at both and had success in both. As an African American, Althea had to overcome many obstacles to achieve success. Well, that one looks pretty good. Let's see what this one says. Because Althea was good at basketball, she was able to succeed at tennis and golf. That's not necessarily what we would be looking for here. I would say we could infer that as an African American, she had to overcome many obstacles. And then if we look at this next part, it says, what 2 pieces of text evidence best support your answer to part A? So what supports this statement that is found in the passage? If you look, let's see, between 1944 and 1950, Althea won the New York State Championship 6 times. Well, that doesn't indicate that she struggled as an African American. So I'm going to exit that out. Excuse me. In those days, African Americans were banned from the most public tennis courts. This statement would definitely indicate that she struggled as an African American because she was very good at the sport, yet she was banned from most of the tennis courts. Okay, let's look at C. In search of better opportunities, Althea's family moved to Harlem, a predominantly Black neighborhood in New York City. It does mention that it's predominantly Black neighborhood, but it doesn't mention anything about their struggles because of that. So I'm going to exit that out. After her success in tennis, Althea retired from the sport and returned to the game of golf. That has nothing to do with the struggles. So I'm going to mark that one out. And summing up her successes, Althea once said, "If I made it, it's half because I was game enough to take a lot of punishment along the way, and half because there were a lot of people who cared enough to help me." I would say this would be a supporting statement because she talks about she was willing to take a lot of punishment along the way. And if you look back in the passage, it does talk about the fact that she was banned just because she was African American. There was still a lot of segregation going on at the time that is mentioned in the story. So I would say B and E are 2 statements that support this answer up here. Okay. And we'll move right along. This one was from social studies, I believe. World War I was being waged in Europe during President Woodrow Wilson's second term in 1916. Germany announced that its submarines would no longer refrain from attacking U.S. ships, even though the United States was officially neutral. On April 2nd, 1917, President Wilson went before Congress to address the rising conflict with Germany. So from Wilson's message to Congress, this is a quote from his speech to Congress. It says, "It is a distressing and oppressive duty, gentlemen of Congress, which I have performed in thus addressing you. There are, it may be, many months of fiery trial and sacrifice ahead of us. It is a fearful thing to lead this great peaceful people into war, into the most terrible and disastrous of all wars, civilization itself seeming to be in the balance. But the right is more precious than peace, and we shall fight for the things which we have always carried nearest our hearts." Okay, so question 1. Which of the following situations led President Wilson to address Congress? Okay, the statues of the war, the status of the war in Europe. not necessarily the beginning of President Wilson's second term. Well, that wouldn't really make him address them with this speech. Increasing military power of Germany, that is not necessarily what inspired this speech, but it was the announcement that Germany would attack US ships. So this is the correct answer. The reason I say that is because right up here, it talks about Germany announced that its submarines would no longer refrain from attacking US ships. That is what caused President Wilson to address Congress. Okay, what can you infer about President Wilson's view about the United States entering World War II? Okay, he believed that it would soon be necessary. He became more determined to remain neutral. He believed the United States would win the war quickly. He believed the war was being fought for economic reasons. Economic reasons had nothing to do with it. He did not say that they would win the war quickly. In fact, he said it was going to be a long, fiery trial and sacrifice ahead of them. So he didn't think that was going to end quickly. He became more determined to remain neutral. That is not what he said. He said that he believed that it would soon be necessary for them to enter into war. Okay. Susan B. Anthony. In 1872, Susan B. Anthony voted in the presidential election and was arrested and fined. She refused to pay her fine and used her arrest to highlight her beliefs about women's rights, especially the right to vote. The campaign to gain national voting rights for women in the United States continued well into the 20th century and did not meet success until after the end of World War I. This is from a Susan B. Anthony speech in 1873. Friends and fellow citizens, I stand before you tonight under indictment for the alleged crime of having voted at the last presidential election without having a lawful right to vote. It shall be my work this evening to prove to you that in thus voting, I not only committed no crime, but instead simply exercised my citizens' rights, guaranteed to me and all United States citizens by the national Constitution, beyond the power of any state to deny. It was we, the people, not we, the white male citizens, nor we, the male citizens, but we, the whole people who formed the Union. And it is a downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment of the blessings of liberty while they are denied the use of the only means of securing them provided by this democratic Republican government, the ballot. Okay, so question 3 says, to what text is Miss Anthony referring to in the second paragraph of her speech? So this is the second paragraph, and it says, let's see, it was we the people, not we the white male citizens, nor we the male citizens, but we the whole people who formed the Union. She is talking about not the Declaration of Independence, not the 20th Amendment, or the Emancipation Proclamation, but she is talking about the preamble to the Constitution. Okay, this is what decided that people in general, U.S. citizens had the right to vote, no matter whether they were male, female, white, black, what have you. Okay, which of the following can you infer based on the information? Susan B. Anthony is mocking the Constitution. She was not mocking it. She was merely quoting it. So that is not the answer. Susan B. Anthony believes the Constitution already guarantees women the right to vote. This is true. This is what we can infer based on this passage. she didn't believe that women were enjoying liberty. They were still being oppressed. She is opposed to amending. She is not opposed to amending. She's saying you should just follow it because it is already written like it is supposed to be written. You just need to follow it because it already gave the women the right to vote. Okay, let's talk about Spain and Puerto Rico. Spain ceded Puerto Rico to the United States following the Spanish-American War. It was placed under military rule until 1900. When the United States established an administrative government there, the 1917 Jones Act officially made Puerto Rico a territory of the United States, granting Puerto Ricans U.S. citizenship. The Jones Act separated the three branches of Puerto Rican government, provided civil rights to individuals, and created a locally elected bicameral legislature. However, Puerto Rico's governor and the U.S. president have the power to veto any law that the legislature passed. Also, the U.S. Congress had the power to stop any action taken by the legislature in Puerto Rico. The United States maintained control over fiscal and economic matters and exercised authority over mail services, immigration, defense, and other basic governmental matters. From the 18th Amendment, so this is a quote or a section from the 18th Amendment. It says, after 1 year from the ratification of this article, the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors within, the importation thereof into, or the exportation thereof from the United States and all territories subject to the jurisdiction thereof for beverage purposes is hereby prohibited. Okay, so what are we talking about? We're talking about intoxicating liquors or alcohol. and they are saying it is hereby prohibited. So if something is prohibited, that means it is against the law. It is not allowed. So we're talking about the manufacture, sale, or transportation of liquor, whether it be in the United States, from the United States to the United States. The Congress, Section 2, the Congress and the several states shall have concurrent power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. Okay. Which of the following can be inferred about Puerto Rico? Puerto Rico objected to Spanish rule. It doesn't necessarily say that they objected to it, but they, Spain basically just said, okay, here you can, basically gave it over to the U.S. Puerto Ricans were subject to the same rules as U.S. citizens under the 18th Amendment. Puerto Rico was allowed to continue some production. They were not allowed. They were under the same rules as the U.S. because they're a U.S. territory. Puerto Rico had to ratify the 18th Amendment before it could become law. The 18th Amendment, they did not have to ratify that. It was already ratified. So Puerto Ricans were subject to the same rules as the U.S. citizens under the 18th Amendment. Okay, the 18th Amendment was ratified in 1919. In which year can you infer that the amendment's measure took effect? So if we look at this 18th Amendment here that they were talking about, let's see. It says 1 year after, or 1 year from the ratification. So if it was ratified in 1919, it took effect in 1 year. So we can infer that it was actually took effect in 1920. Okay. This is still about prohibition, which is the law against alcohol. Prohibition refers to a period during which making, transporting, or selling of alcoholic beverages was prohibited or illegal. In the United States, a movement to outlaw alcohol began in the mid-1800s and quickly rose to national attention. After World War I, the 18th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution instituted prohibition as a national law. However, this law proved very difficult to enforce. Many Americans participated in the illegal production of alcohol, known as bootlegging. Underground drinking establishments and organized crime activity flourished. By 1933. The 21st Amendment had no repealed prohibition. As of 19, I think that was supposed to be 38, no state prohibition laws remained in effect. Okay, so what can be inferred based on the repeal of prohibition by the 21st Amendment? So repeal means they overturned it. Okay, so by 1933, the amendment had repealed prohibition. So they no longer supported prohibition by 1933. This has nothing to do with it. Bootlegging has nothing to do with it. Whether it proved unprofitable or not, I'm sure it was profitable for many people. Yes, it was a little more difficult to enforce, but this is what we could infer, is that by 1933, Congress no longer supported the law against alcohol. I'm sure they were tired of fighting all the bootlegging and things that were going on, and it was just useless. What can you infer from the passage above about state prohibition laws? They may have been a little bit easier to enforce. If you have a small area and a local government enforcing it, it's probably a little easier to enforce than the federal law. What can you infer based on the fact that many Americans took part in illegal production and consumption of alcohol? Most Americans were not law-abiding citizens. I don't think that's necessarily what they were getting at. However, I do think that a lot of Americans believe that prohibition restricted their individual rights. I think they believed that it was their right to consume or buy or sell alcohol if they so chose to. I think the police did try to infer the law. They just had trouble doing it. So I'm going to mark those out. Jobs of Americans depended on the production of alcohol. That's not necessarily true. That's not something that we would infer from this passage. Okay, so the answer is B. Americans believe prohibition restricted their individual rights as citizens. Okay, milestones of the 1920s. Okay, so here we have a little chart about the milestones of the 1920s. Excuse me. 1920 says the first commercial radio broadcast by radio station KDKA. Automobile with combustion engine was invented by Henry Ford. Created thousands of new jobs. Traffic light invented by police officer William Potts. First transatlantic airplane flight. First talking movie, The Jazz Singer, was released, and it goes so on and so forth. In arts, we had Louis Armstrong joined the jazz band, the famous jazz band, King Oliver's Creole. Edith Wharton won a Pulitzer Prize for her novel, The Age of Innocence. In society, 1925, women started cutting their hair, didn't wear corsets anymore. They went more to the flapper fashion. Chicago organized crime members were killed in St. Valentine's Day Massacre. In law, let's see, League of Nations is dissolved, although the U.S. never became a member. U.S. still institutes an 8-hour workday. Ford Motor Company increases minimum wage from $6 to $7 per day. Okay, so let's look at the question. Based on the milestones reported in the table, which of the following can be inferred about the 1920s? Life in the 1920s was dangerous? Not necessarily. All of this doesn't really lead to that conclusion. Life for working people were more difficult in the 1920s than decades prior. Nothing in there would lead me to believe that. Artists and musicians gain international fame. They might have, but that's not really what we're looking for, I think, here. The 1920s was a time of exciting innovation. I would say this is probably the best answer. That is what I would gather from all of these events that happened. It was pretty exciting. We had the first commercial radio broadcast. We had the first automobile with combustion engine, the first transatlantic flight. I mean, there was lots of things going on. So I would say it was a pretty exciting time of innovation. Excuse me. Of the following experience, which can be inferred to have empowered women in the 1920s? Let's see, working in factories. I don't think that necessarily empowered them. It might have a little bit, but I don't think that that's necessarily would be the best answer. Going to plays and movies, I don't think that empowered women. I believe they did gain the right to vote. I think it was 1919 whenever it passed, and it was 1920 when it actually went into effect that women can vote. Being able to drive cars, they were always able to drive cars before that. So gaining the right to vote, the reason that I would guess that is just based on my prior knowledge of the amendment. I think it was the 19th Amendment that went into effect in the 1920s that gave women the right to vote. So again, it's just making those assumptions based on prior knowledge. Okay, I'm going to exit out of that one. I've got another short thing about political cartoons that I want to go over. This one we looked at in class. This is a political cartoon. I pointed out that it was from the 1930s, I believe. Let's see, I lost my pen there. Yeah, 1930. And it was called The Philanthropist. And we had the rich guy because he's wearing the top hat and ritzy clothes. And then we had what looks like a poor guy. He's in everyday clothes for the time period. And he is over here with a sign, the help the unemployed. And he's selling apples for 5 cents. And then you see the rich guy eating all the apples. He must be pretty hungry. He's ate several. And they both appear to be on the side of the street. Okay, so which of the following elements in this cartoon could be considered a caricature? A caricature is means it's just the point of the cartoon, the main character. I would think most likely, knowing this is the 1930s, this is the time period of when the Depression happened, and the stock market went down, people were poor. I would think it's more about this rich guy being on the side of the street with the poor man as well. I would think it's more about the man eating the apples as the focus. So what statement is the cartoonist making about the Depression? We talked about this in our lesson. And I believe from inference that it affected the wealthy as well as the poor. Yes, it caused unemployment to increase. It did cause the price of food to rise in the nation, but that's not necessarily what this cartoon the point that it's trying to get across. It's trying to get across that the Great Depression affected everybody, including the rich, not just the poor. Okay, similar to political cartoons, political posters and advertisements are created by artists to editorialize or express messages or beliefs and to achieve an emotional response. These posters may sometimes be used as propaganda, which is something designed to promote a particular idea or doctrine. This poster promotes one of the New Deal's most popular programs, the Civilization Conservation Corps, known as the CCC. It provided labor-intensive work for the unemployed. The New Deal was basically, it was the president's new plan to make the U.S. strong again after the Great Depression. Question 3, which of the following best describes the way the article depicts the young civilian conservation corps worker in this poster? So let's take a look at him. This is a very black and white, kind of a poor picture, but if we look, he's kind of got a smile on his face. He's standing up tall. He's got good posture. He looks strong. So out of all of these words, I think proud would probably describe what he looks like. Doesn't look angry. I wouldn't describe it as courteous, and he doesn't look exhausted. He kind of looks like he's ready to go. He's looking energetic. So I would say proud is the most fitting word. Okay, what was the program feature in this poster most likely designed to confront? Was it bank failures, political corruption, outbreaks of disease, or unemployment? Okay, work, play, study, and health. And the CCC was known for providing work for the unemployed. So I would pick unemployment. It's not about bank failure or political corruption or outbreaks of disease. Which was most likely the reason the poster was designed to create a positive image of the CCC? I would say since this looks like he's holding like a pickaxe or something like that, probably doing manual hard labor. This is what the CCC was offering. I would say that it was trying to make that manual labor look desirable. They were trying to create a positive image of the CCC because the jobs that they were offering were very difficult. They were hard work. So it wasn't that they had too many applicants or necessarily that they weren't trying to combat the image that they were desirable. Obviously, people wanted jobs, and it doesn't talk about the wages being good, but it's trying to make it look like, hey, I'm proud, I'm working. So it's kind of trying to gloss over the fact that they were very hard manual labor jobs. Okay, presidential terms. Let's see. The U.S. Constitution does not specify the number of terms a president can serve, but George Washington had set the precedent that presidents hold office for only 2 terms. However, Franklin D. Roosevelt was elected president 4 times, in 1932, 1936, 1940, and 1944. In response to FDR's 4 terms, Republicans were able to push an amendment through Congress in 1947, limiting a president to only 2 terms. It was ratified as the 22nd Amendment in 1951. Why does the cartoonist portray President Roosevelt as a king. Okay, so if you look at the cartoon, this is supposed to be President Roosevelt, and he's got his crown on looking like a king. Let's see. So our choices are he believes president should wear robes and command more respect. I don't think that that's what they were getting at. He believes President Roosevelt is acting like a king because of his desire for a third term. He wants the United States to become a monarchy, or he is mocking the monarchy of America's British allies. I would say because he is wanting another term. And they were thinking, you know, a lot of people thought that he had been in office long enough that he needed to let somebody else come in and be president. Okay, which of the following can be inferred as the reason a Republican-controlled Congress supported the 22nd Amendment? They wanted to make sure that all future presidents had at least 2 terms. They were eager to satisfy a public that wanted to place term limits on the president. They were following the President Roosevelt's wish to be the only 4-term president. They wanted to ensure that no other Democrat would win election more than 2 times. I would think that most likely the answer would be that they wanted to ensure that no other Democrat would win. The reason I would infer that is because it states that it was the Republicans that wanted to push the amendment through that was limiting the president. So they were tired of the Democratic Party being in control of the presidency, and they were ready for a Republican to come in. Okay. After the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor in late 1941, the United States was propelled into World War II. For almost 4 years, Americans fought in Europe against Nazi Germany and its allies and against Japan in the Pacific. Okay, so let's look at this cartoon. Looks like we have some type of animal, rhinoceros with this is the swastika, which represented the Nazi Germany or the Nazis. Which of the following does the animal in the cage represent? I would say Nazi Germany and its allies because of that big swastika. Again, this is an inference based on prior knowledge. Anytime we've ever seen this symbol in history, current US history, it has had to do with Nazis and Germany. Okay, after Japanese bomb Pearl Harbor, oh, I've already read this. Okay, according to the cartoon, which of the following will occur as a result of buying savings bonds and stamps? Let's see. Allowing the building of more zoos. This has nothing to do with it. Make millions of dollars for people who buy bonds and stamps. American soldiers win the war. Help the United States and German become more friendly toward each other. I would say it would make millions of dollars for people who were buying stamps. According to the cartoon, in which of the following roles is the United States best represented? Uncle Sam, the zookeeper, keeping the dangerous Nazi animal from doing harm. A smiling duck-like bird carrying a rifle. A zookeeper trying to raise money for more cages. As a large dinosaur-like animal being carted about in a cage. So this would be Uncle Sam. This bird has his little top hat on and his little Uncle Sam. So I'm thinking Uncle Sam or the US keeping the Nazi animal from doing harm. So they were trying to keep the control under Nazis. Okay. In And that is all that I have for today, going over our lessons. I hope you were able to get to most of those. Do you have any questions for me right now? We got done just about 10 minutes early. So if you haven't done all of your assignments up until now, I know there was some of you that didn't have assignments done for class 2. Most of you have class 1 done and some of class 2. I just would really encourage you to take some time and get caught up on those. If you need to, go back and watch lessons, or you can always email me or text me, and I would be happy to help. If I need to meet with you in another Zoom on one-on-one, I'd be willing to do that. But if you don't have any questions for me right now, we will just end for today. Our next class is going to be on Monday, and we will meet at 9 and 11 again. And we will do a little bit of review and then go over a little bit of new stuff and just go from there. If you would, go ahead and type your name in the chat box to sign out of our class. As soon as you do that, if you don't have any questions for me, you are free to go. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you on Monday. Thank you.